Bob Guttman, Robert J. Guttman, and I'm starting a podcast on American politics. It's going to be called Political Profiles. Way back in 1978, I started a company called Political Profiles before the internet. And I started a company to do presidential profiles, nonpartisan magazines on presidential candidates. The first magazine I started was on a guy named George Herbert Walker Bush. And his wife, Barbara Bush, came and bought 100 copies from me, and we were off and running and sold 600 to 800,000 copies that year. And for the next 3 elections, I did magazines on Reagan and all the presidential candidates, 80, 84, and 88. Then I started a newsletter, which became the second largest in the country, nonpartisan newsletter called Political Profiles Report. And in the years I had it, I did hundreds of, probably 1,000 interviews. In the last 40 years, I've probably done close to 3,000 interviews with world leaders. So we're going to talk about American politics, but also for 20 years after I did political profiles for 78 to 89, I sold the company and went to work for the European Union, the 28 countries of Europe. And I became editor-in-chief of Europe magazine, the flagship magazine of the European Union, for the next 20 years. And I went around Europe every couple months doing interviews with world leaders. I covered the fall of the Berlin Wall. I covered the fall of the Soviet Union. I did one of the first interviews with President Václav Havel in Prague after the Czech Revolution. So I covered Europe, covered European American politics. I interviewed both Clinton and Bush in 1992, put them on the cover of my Europe magazine. And so I have a very good background. And then I went to, after I left the European Union and Europe magazine, I continued with Europe at Center for Transatlantic Relations at Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies in Washington, where I started Transatlantic Magazine print copy. And then after I did that, I still have transatlanticmagazine.com. You can check it out on the internet. I've done over 200 stories since 2006 when I started it. And I've become a professor. I've been teaching at Hopkins. I've taught over 50 classes since 2006 on American politics, American media, American social media, American foreign policy. And now I'm teaching at University of Virginia, up in Northern Virginia. And I'm teaching politics and media. Been a visiting professor at UC Berkeley, and also taught at George Washington and Cornell. So I've had a background in politics. In 1986, I tried to get the Democratic nomination for the U.S. Senate to run against Dan Quayle. I raised several $1 million. He raised about $30 million, so I didn't have that much money, and I didn't win. Went on to become press secretary for a congressman from Indiana. I worked on 2 presidential campaigns. I worked for a guy named George McGovern when I was in graduate school at American University in international relations, and I worked for McGovern for 3 years. Helped him lose 49 out of 50 states, but I was very active in his foreign policy. And then in '68, I was at the Democratic Convention where I demonstrated in the street for Gene McCarthy. So I've been to very many, most of the Democratic conventions since 1968. I hosted Madeleine Albright in 2008 in Denver. Barack Obama came over and I threw a basketball with him. I had several other people. We had speakers, and I took everybody up to Vail Symposium. So I've had speakers. In 2016, I had Bernie Sanders, when he first started, come speak. We couldn't get 50 people to show up. And weeks later, he's speaking to 2,000 people. I've had Joe Biden be my speaker in 2008. And this fall, I'm going to have several of the presidential candidates come speak at Hopkins. I'm teaching a course, graduate course, pre-presidential primary, campaigning, communicating, and controversy. And we'll be following the debates coming up in the fall. Tomorrow night we have the first Democratic debate, and then we have the other one on Thursday. I used to go to all the debates when I started covering politics. 1980, I went to the first debates. I used to do a lot of shows for CNN. I was a guest analyst. I had a radio show for 2 years in town where I was a host for 2 hours in the morning talking about politics. So this is my first podcast. I guess it continues my magazine The other things I've done is I've had a partnership with the Financial Times, London-based, largest financial newspaper in the world. For the last 15 years, we put on 78 events. Our first event was with a guy named Senator Joe Biden. My last event was with a guy named Senator Joe Biden. So we've had Biden speak 3 times. Hope to get him to speak now since he's a front runner for the Democrats for the presidency. And my second speaker was a guy named John Kerry, who became Secretary of State. So we've had a lot of world leaders speak at Hopkins and other places around the world. So I've been involved in public policy, covering politics as a journalist for 40 years. I was a White House, Congressional, Capitol Hill correspondent. And I was a press secretary on Capitol Hill. And my wife was working at Stanford at the Hoover Institution. She started with a guy, she was the 4th hire with a guy named Governor Ronald Reagan. She came out here and worked as a special assistant to the president for 6 years in her 20s, and I covered the White House. We met. We've been married 33 years. I was formerly a liberal Democrat. She was formerly a conservative Republican. Neither one of us can stand the current president, so I blog about him quite a bit on my transatlanticmagazine.com. Anyway, just expanding what I do. People said podcasts are the way to go now, so I'm incorporating it into my transatlantic magazine and tying it in with my political profiles from my early days. So that's kind of where we are. We'll be talking about the debates. I think, personally, these aren't debates. If you are a true debater, you do Oxford-style debating from Oxford University, where you have a topic and then everybody actually debates. Tomorrow night and Thursday night on NBC, MSNBC, and Telemundo, people will not be debating. They'll have 30 seconds to respond, 60 seconds to respond. So you're going to have 10 people on stage each night because they qualified through getting donations and getting a certain amount in the polls. But everyone's going to try to figure a way to get the American public to notice them. Most of these people we don't know. Biden is a former vice president for 8 years. We have a couple senators. We have a mayor, a couple congressmen. But a lot of people aren't that well known. So they're going to try to come up with something this week. Bernie Sanders has come up with free tuition at universities, community colleges. Beto O'Rourke came up with something which I'm not quite sure, military tax for families to help the military. Elizabeth Warren comes out with a new policy, it seems like every day or every week. So everyone's going to try to, Tulsi Gabbard, Cory Booker, Seth Moulton, Ryan, Congressman Ryan, a lot of these people we don't know who they are. They're going to try to show that they have some gravitas and that they need to be given money. So what we're going to see after Wednesday and Thursday, who's getting, sadly, American politics, a lot of it's about money. Former Speaker of the House, Jess Unruh, many years ago in California said politics is about 3 things, money, money, and money. I would agree it's money, money, and personality, and some based on character, since we have a president with poor character. So it'll be idea, money, money, character, and some policy issues. And since we almost dropped some bombs on Iran, foreign policy will be a topic. The character or lack of character of the president and his bungling in the White House will be an issue. So I think we'll be looking for somebody that has some experience, which the president had none in politics. He wasn't even a dog catcher. So now we have people like Bernie Sanders, who've been a senator, Elizabeth Warren, a senator, Kamala Harris, a senator, Cory Booker, a senator, Buttigieg, Mayor Pete, a mayor. So we have a lot of people with some experience. And so I think that's what people are going to be looking for. Anyway, tomorrow night and Thursday night, it's going to be a crowded stage. And sadly, people who are going to be the best known are the NBC correspondents. The anchor of the evening news and the people from the Today Show. So they're going to be better known than the candidates. So tomorrow night, if you all remember back in 2016, the Republicans had all these people on stage too. And Ronald Reagan had the least experience, but I think, and it's not to sound simplistic, he was basically most of the time in the center of the stage. His placement was good. And he was taller than everybody else. He was taller than Marco Rubio. He was taller than everybody else. So we'll see who gets good placement at the stage and who comes out with you know, the next day or that night, talking in the news, people say, I didn't know the governor of Washington, Inslee, had all that going for him. I didn't know the former governor of Colorado, Hickenlooper, had all these good, I didn't know Seth Moulton had all these good talks. So people will try to, in 30 seconds, 60 seconds, nobody's getting an opening statement. People will get a final closing 60-second statement. So they'll ask for your vote and ask you to send money. So the people who show an uptick in money in the next 48 hours will people that stick around, because the next debates will be in July. Obviously, if you don't get the money or you didn't do too well in this first debate, you may not qualify for the next debate. First debate, you needed 65,000 individual donors from separate states, 20 separate states. Now they're doubling it. You have to get 130,000 donors and be up to 2 or 3% in the polls. So they're making it harder in July, and then in September, there'll be another debate. So I'll be hosting an event at Johns Hopkins in Washington, D.C. in September. You're all invited to. So we will be talking mostly about American politics. This is political profiles. But political profiles also can include when foreign heads of state come to the United States, mainly Europeans who I've interviewed. We'll talk to foreign ministers, finance ministers. We'll talk to the head of the World Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund. We'll talk to different people who are players on the world stage. And we'll do political profiles. And I said we'll be part of YouTube, and we'll also be part of my translatingmagazine.com. So for the next year, we'll be discussing mostly 90% American politics, but we'll be covering the European Union and what's happening with the British, who's going to take over from Theresa May. Will they have another vote to see if they can stay? Probably not, but how they'll leave the EU. So we'll be talking about American politics, American policymakers, and we'll do some business leaders. People like to talk about. I've interviewed very well-known business leaders in the past. So I'll be talking to people who help make policy around the country. Anyway, we'll have better backdrops in the future. This is our beginning. As I said, I used to do radio and TV. Now I'm going into podcasts. So I'm keeping up with what's happening. Who knows what the next thing will be after this. So this is Bob Guttman with Political Profiles. If you want my email to get in touch with me, it's rguttman@jhu.edu. Love to hear from you. And I'll be back again. I'll try to do this a couple times a week during the election season. So let's rock on and have a good time. Bye.